A special thank you to each of our subscribers who make this channel possible. Here's today's story. In recent years, Belarus has witnessed a chilling crackdown on journalism, with dozens of journalists imprisoned under the authoritarian regime of President Alexander Lukashenko. The plight of these journalists has drawn international attention, highlighting the severe risks associated with practicing journalism in a country where dissent is met with brutal repression. One such journalist, Ksenia Lutskina, served only half of her 8-year prison sentence after being convicted of conspiracy to overthrow the government. Lutskina, who was diagnosed with a brain tumor during her pretrial detention, was pardoned after her health deteriorated significantly. She recalls being brought to the penal colony in a wheelchair, a stark reminder of the life-threatening nature of journalism in Belarus. I realized that journalism has really turned into a life-threatening profession in Belarus, she stated in an interview from Vilnius, Lithuania, where she currently resides. Lutskina's experience is not unique. She is among dozens of journalists who have faced imprisonment, beatings, and inadequate medical care in Belarusian prisons, which activists and former inmates have likened to Soviet-era facilities. According to Reporters Without Borders, Belarus is now recognized as Europe's leading jailer of journalists, with at least 40 individuals serving long prison sentences. The Belarusian Association of Journalists reports that over 65,000 arrests occurred between 2020 and 2025, following mass protests against a widely denounced fraudulent election that solidified Lukashenko's grip on power. The crackdown on journalists has forced many to flee the country, seeking safety and the ability to report from abroad. However, the situation remains dire as many independent media outlets struggle to survive after a significant reduction in foreign aid, particularly following cuts implemented during the Trump administration. Andrei Bastianets, chair of the Belarusian Association of Journalists, emphasized that journalists now face both internal repression and external funding challenges, pushing many editorial offices to the brink of collapse. The repression has extended beyond just journalists to include anyone perceived as a threat to the regime. Families of targeted journalists have been threatened, and many have requested that rights groups refrain from discussing their cases publicly for fear of further reprisals. Monthly reports reveal new arrests and searches, with almost all independent media forced to cease operations within Belarus. Even those who attempt to shift their focus to non-political content are not spared. In December, the entire editorial staff of Intex Press, a regional publication, was arrested under charges of assisting extremist activity. The term extremism has become a common pretext for detaining and punishing critically minded citizens. The crackdown has also seen the jailing of journalists for merely consuming independent media that has been labeled as extremist. Reporters Without Borders has documented that 397 Belarusian journalists have faced unjust arrests since 2020, with many detained multiple times. Approximately 600 journalists have moved abroad, yet they continue to face pressure from Belarusian authorities, who can pursue cases against them in absentia, place them on international wanted lists, and even target their families. In January, Reporters Without Borders filed a lawsuit with the International Criminal Court, accusing Belarusian authorities of committing crimes against humanity, including torture, persecution, and forced displacement of journalists. Katsiarina Bakvalova, a journalist for Belsat, was arrested while covering the 2020 protests and sentenced to 8 years after being convicted of treason while in a penal colony. Her husband, political analyst Ahar Eliash, is currently imprisoned on charges of discrediting Belarus. The situation for imprisoned journalists remains grim. Andrzej Poczobut, a correspondent for the Polish newspaper Gazeta Wyborcza, is serving an 8-year sentence in a penal colony despite suffering from a serious heart condition. His situation highlights the severe health risks faced by journalists in Belarusian prisons, where inadequate medical care is commonplace. Marina Zolotava, former editor of the now-defunct TUT.by, is serving a 12-year sentence for incitement and distributing materials deemed harmful to national security. Despite international outcry and calls for action, Lukashenko has shown little willingness to change his repressive tactics. Analysts suggest that he views political prisoners as bargaining chips, willing to release journalists and activists in exchange for improved relations with the West and the easing of economic sanctions. This cynical approach was evident when he pardoned several individuals shortly after Trump began his second term, demonstrating a willingness to negotiate with foreign powers. The stories of journalists like Lutskina, Bakvalova, Poczobut, and Zolotava serve as a stark reminder of the dangers faced by those who dare to speak out against the regime. Lutskina, who fled to Lithuania with her 14-year-old son, reflects on the oppressive atmosphere in Belarus, describing it as a gray country under a gray sky, where people are afraid of everything and speak in whispers. She emphasizes the importance of teaching her son to distinguish truth from lies, a lesson that resonates deeply in a nation where independent thought is stifled. As the situation in Belarus continues to evolve, the international community must remain vigilant and support the brave journalists and activists fighting for freedom of expression. The struggle for democracy in Belarus is far from over, and the sacrifices made by those who dare to challenge the status quo should not be forgotten. The world must stand in solidarity with the oppressed and hold accountable those responsible for the ongoing repression of free speech and human rights in Belarus. That's all for this story. We upload videos every day covering many different subjects, so hit that subscribe button to stay informed. Thanks for watching.